Hi all of you wonderful scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel and welcome to Ask Mark, our scuba diving Q&A, where I, Mark, as former dive instructor, do my best to answer your scuba diving questions. If you do have any scuba diving questions, pop them down in the comment section underneath this video and use this hashtag in your comment and I'll get to it as soon as I can. And the community does an awesome job of answering questions, so if you do see any questions down in the comment section, just type out an answer for them, just in case I don't get there, because I don't get there and I'm going on holiday and then next week. That's actually why you're getting an Ask Mark instead of a podcast today, because I've been on holiday for the previous week. So I don't know, all sorts of interesting things may have happened in the previous week, but yeah, I can only do this kind of content in advance. But anyway, this week I'm answering a question from, I'm going to say Mino, it's M33NO, and they're asking about whether they need two transmitters if they're diving twins. So Mino49 says, hi Mark, about twin back mount, do I need two transmitters or is one enough? I know it's easy with side mount, one transmitter for each tank. I can't find an answer on the web, hoping you might help me. Now, this is actually an age-old question, but just like the modern version of it. So with twins, two cylinders, twins banded together with a manifold in the center. So this is a manifolded twin set with an isolator valve. So this allows gas to transfer between the cylinders. So you can just breathe from a single first stage throughout the entire dive because you're drawing gas from both cylinders. However, should something go wrong with that one, you can isolate it so that the remaining gas in the opposite cylinder is isolated, and you can shut this valve down so it's not venting any excess gas and then flooding the cylinder. But would you have a pressure gauge on both sides? And the argument for that is, yeah, if you do have to isolate, then you have one pressure gauge for each cylinder, and then you can run off that. So no matter which first stage has failed, or whichever valve or whatever has failed, you can still know how much gas is left in the remaining cylinder. The traditional way of doing it is having a pressure gauge only on the left-hand post. And there's good reason for that. The main reason is that the second pressure gauge is only useful if, yeah, you are in that out of air, well, not even out of air situation, but a failure situation where you had to isolate and turn off the left valve. Now, in that situation, your dive is over anyway, and you're going to be heading back up to the surface. You should roughly know, I mean, not to the exact bar or PSI, but you should know roughly how much gas is left in your cylinder anyway, and regardless, you're going to get back to the surface and you're going with your buddy as well, so you should have enough redundancy to get back to the surface. By adding a second pressure gauge, you're adding a lot more like failure points, basically. A lot more O-rings, more hose, another pressure gauge, something like multiple items that can all fail and lead to leaks and more maintenance and added cost, really. So most divers would only dive with a single pressure gauge and just run off of that. And yeah, should something happen, they might be lucky enough that it happened to the right-hand post and you can still monitor the gas from the left-hand side. If it did happen to the left-hand side, hey, you have this remaining gas and just get to the surface as soon as possible. That's kind of it. That being said, now we're in the modern age of transmitters. There's kind of benefit and redundancy to having both. Would you have two transmitters? Maybe. A transmitter is going to cost a lot more than a submersible pressure gauge. It has additional maintenance to it because you need to change and maintain that battery. So that's something that you need to just be aware of. The dive computer as well does need to be a consideration because it's going to be receiving two signals. Sometimes they can like get some interference from one another, especially being so close. So I'd probably put them on hoses just to move them a little bit further away. Transmitter technology is a lot better than it used to. They do work on different frequencies for this exact reason, so you're going to get less of that interference. But on your dive computer, you might have to set them up as separate cylinders. It depends on the model. Either way, you're either going to see like the primary transmitter on your main screen and maybe the second one right underneath it, and it's going to read the exact same information because it's the same transmitter. You might have to flick through some screens, but hey, it's that's really up to the dive computer. And yeah, other than the additional cost, it just comes down to like redundancy. Personally, I dive with a submersible pressure gauge on my left-hand post, the old school version, because it can't run out of batteries, and a transmitter on my right-hand post. So I get the best of both worlds. My dive computer can tell me my gas time remaining and all that kind of stuff, and alert me if the cylinder pressure drops below a certain point. But if something went wrong with it and I'd isolate it, I still have my SPG, and vice versa. If something wrong with the left-hand post, I still have my transmitter. So best of both worlds. Just the pressure, you'll suddenly see an increase in the breathing rate because the volume is effectively halved when you isolate it. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's not essential. If you can warrant the additional cost, yeah, it would be quite nice, but it's not really essential. It's an old sort of query and thought process for divers, whether you need separate SPGs for each first stage. Most divers say no, just only have it on the left-hand side. A second one is a bit too much redundancy. Now we have transmitters, you're throwing an extra kind of angle into it. It's more useful than a second submersible pressure gauge. Would you have two? That feels a bit excessive for me. I'd probably just run with a, well, I do run with a submersible pressure gauge and a wireless air transmitter. Yeah, it's interesting because it is as I said, it's an old question that's been going around as long as we've had twin sets, or at least manifolded twin sets, about whether we need a second submersible pressure gauge. But now that we have wireless air transmitters, it's a modern like evolution of that. And yeah, it's, as with so many of my answers, it's like no, but it's personal preference again. If you can afford to have a second transmitter, then yeah, and it will function depending on the dive computer. Most connect to more than one transmitter nowadays, but that's something that you have to double check with your model. Otherwise, yeah, I run a wireless air transmitter and a submersible pressure gauge. I just find that the best redundancy. I still have my old school pressure gauge, and you can like cross-reference them as well. If your transmitter says something wildly different to your pressure gauge, then yeah, you can assess that in the water. And yeah, the transmitters, I do find them useful. I know some divers don't like them, but I like that they give you that additional safety feature, as it were. So yeah, if my breathing rate suddenly increases for whatever reason, I can see that on my screen and go, that's a bit weird. Or if my gas pressure suddenly drops below a certain point, then it'll alert me. Those kind of things. And it's quite useful to, like, after the dive, assess your breathing rate, and you can kind of see if different like finning techniques are more beneficial. They're improving your breathing rate, or whatever it is. It's just interesting information to keep. But two transmitters, they're basically going to be doing the same job right up until a first stage fails, which is unusual. So it's kind of, for me, it's too much redundancy. It seems a bit excessive, but hey, it might be different for other divers. Let me know what you do down in the comments below. Yeah, as I said, I use an old school brass and glass submersible pressure gauge, just because they're tried and tested. They definitely do the job, and a wireless air transmitter for the modernity to it. But no, I've never thought of having two transmitters. That seems a little odd to me. Any other questions, pop it down in the comment section underneath this video. Use this AskMark hashtag to get it featured in an up and coming video, and just to catch my attention, basically, because there are a lot of comments running through the channel, and I try to get to as many as possible. But yeah, otherwise, remember to head over to our website, scubadivingmag.com. Check out the awesome things that we do over there. Check out the magazine subscription as well. We've got a bunch of them. We've got one for sort of the UK and Europe. We've got one for the Americas. We've got one for Australia and New Zealand as well. And they have different content throughout. They're available both digitally and physically if you like a physical copy. But yeah, thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.